Hello, everyone. It is Saturday. Excuse me. Just getting back home. Hello, everyone. I'll say that again. It is Saturday, the 27th of January, 2024. Sun's coming out just as I do this video. I just got home from Quebec, like another province. I live in Ontario, and visited some family. Went with the dogs, and I wasn't going to do a video today, but I'm home much earlier than I thought. It is what it is. I did want to also discuss excess deaths internationally as well. So it's not like I would not take this opportunity anyways to discuss this stuff because a lot of people are talking about it. And of course, I've been talking about excess deaths regarding and the possible link to therapeutics that were pushed on people for the last few years. I have to be careful with my words because I don't want to get friggin' more strikes. So I'll just leave it at that. And so I'm going to share some videos that people may have seen before, but it's people that are more credible than mainstream media or independent journalists regarding like even discussions of the pandemic from the very start. And actually, no, I'm going to have to take that back because Jimmy Dore and Dr. John Campbell are fully vaccinated and they were pushing or at least promoting the therapeutic originally. But they are people who, whether it be because of vaccine injury or because of getting more scientific and medical data, changed their minds and have since been quite vocal on this. And if you want to take a look at Dr. John Campbell's work, I highly recommend people take a look at it. I've been sharing his content for years. And yes, there are people that hold a bit of anger and resentment towards Dr. John Campbell. I understand where you're coming from. I do, because he was really pushing this at first, and I was really frustrated as well. Like I multiple comments trying to give him like the reports, the debunked trials, the VAERS that were coming out, and he just like it was just frustrating that anyway, finally got to him clearly, and has since changed his mind and has also been reporting excess deaths and a possible link to that, and not things like climate change. Okay, possible links to excess death and not things like smoking pot or cigarettes or things that have been like commonly known, like where you could predict the outcomes more accurately and more precisely than things like what we're dealing with now. And please take a look at my other videos. Fluvid19. I'm not sure if it's up on YouTube. It's definitely up on Rumble, which is Dawn189. That's my handle on Rumble, where I have way more videos than on X or YouTube, possibly even combined. And so definitely, actually, yeah, absolutely. And the link between that and then where I also share the VAERS reports, not only from February of 2021, just from Pfizer, not even from Moderna or AstraZeneca or J&J or Novavax or Sanofi, like none of those, literally just Pfizer, and alarming. And this is something that should have been taken seriously, and why myself and others like me have been repeatedly sharing information at risk to myself and other people I know for the last few years now, right? And for me, it's been since the very beginning. And the reason why is because I was part of the Mafequin mass torts a few years before the pandemic was declared. And it was specifically to change policies, not for money, but to change policies within the Canadian Armed Forces, and not have it where there was forced inoculations especially for this specifically was for Mafequin, which was an anti-malarial drug that was banned in other countries already. First world countries, New Zealand, Australia, banned in countries before it was approved for Canadian consumption. And a lot of adverse side effects and stuff like that came out of that. This is readily known. And when I looked at those reports, like it was significant and frustrating even at that time, which is why policy change is how we make changes at a societal level, and why like a few years before the pandemic was declared, I was on high alert trying to change policy, mass tort, where the team that I was working with, we're literally, it was against federal government in order to change these policies, and still waiting for the courts because it was delayed because of the pandemic, the lockdowns. A lot of things were blamed on that stuff that our government was pushing because there were certain people within the cabinet level and the corporations they were working with that were their friends and family that were directly profiting from the lies, right? So like, I'll even give you an example of Doug Ford. Doug Ford, for those of you who don't know, he's the premier of Ontario. And people at the federal level are blaming people at the provincial level, just to be clear, for how they handled the pandemic, the possible pandemic. And Doug Ford lied about his post-secondary education. The education system that he has as listed is one that was only changed in 2018 into a post-secondary institution. It was prior to that, it was a high school. And so it's so easy to find out. And this is what's frustrating. And I'll get to that point as well. But like people in my network, this is like the level of research that we do and that's necessary to do. And when we're getting fucked off by people like Phil Gursky and Justin Ling, who are leftists, who their only experience in life is working for leftist media, state-funded media. They have no background in international security or defense. They don't have any security clearances. They nothing like that. And journalists for mainstream media, state-funded media, and lied in articles and extremely dramatized people, calling them right-wing extremists, talking about terrorists, but giving no names and stuff like that. And again, like CSIS literally took this information. I shared this yesterday from an access to information request that I was provided by Ethos and Eris. That's his handle for his podcast, but I'm not going to give his real name. But he gave that to me, and I've asked him for a few other access to information requests that I'm really excited about, because like, again, like unless you ask for these things and get it officially on the record, they're going to keep hiding it. In the incompetence, at all levels is being literally hidden, and why people are just shuffling in and out of other positions in cabinet instead of getting fired or just moving on with their lives and stopping and not, like stop ruining our lives. Like Pablo Rodriguez, who was a heritage minister. Now he's doing something else, terribly, but was one of the worst heritage ministers in Canada's history, and approved the destruction of heritage sites. As a heritage minister, you think that that'd be the opposite of what he would do? National parks, churches, shredding millions of trees during this time. Sorry, I got to back up with Doug Ford. Anyway, he funded the censorship bill with Pablo Rodriguez, and with our money. And so we are further censored in Canada, and they're using our money to further oppress us. And this is why they need to be fired and jailed for treason. And so, moving on from him, who's never responded to any of my emails, even though I've given him phone calls, left messages, and I have the receipts, and I've given him sent messages. I've given him emails, and I have the sent messages that I can share. I have before, and they don't care, and they have part-time hours, and again, they're not even working. And so to continue on Doug Ford, he doesn't have a post-secondary. Lied about that. His decal business was worth maybe $2 million at the most before the start of the pandemic, and now it's multi-million. Like the last I checked, it was like 54 million, like the net worth now. And so this was at the beginning of the pandemic, where I was even sharing like so much information, like oh my god, and what I was getting out of the hospitals with people that I knew that were in, and unbelievable the mismanagement at all levels. But anyway, all the signage for hospitals and grocery stores and all these friggin' areas, that's the decal business that was used. Like the Premier of Ontario. So just to be clear, the Premier of Ontario literally profited multi-millions, dozens of millions of dollars of our money, okay? And further kept us locked down because he was profiting off of it. And so was Justin Trudeau and his other friends. Marco Menincino, who was the public safety officer who resigned last year, and he should be in jail for treason. Again, during the Freedom Convoy, he a bunch of lies, trying to employ tanks on innocent civilians as well. By the way, I've shared all those receipts, trying to get crisis actors that were leftists, even millionaires like Brian Fox, and leftist groups to make it look like they were right-wing extremists. And Justin Ling, like a CBC journalist right out of high school, right, like with a nothing to, oh my god, literally talking about CSIS literally called him a counter-terrorist expert, a guy that literally went, again, like journalism. And this is oh my god, I was talking to my sister about this, but I'm like, I can't believe that people that have like journalists as a background are in cabinet and leading us, and heads of corporations and stuff like that. That's, you should end with journalism in your career. But before that, if you're going to be working in cabinet or in any level of government, you need to have the experience, the strategic experience, the international experience, being of service to Canada for a while, just to show and demonstrate your dedication and commitment in order to get to that position to begin with, not be hired because of who you're having sex with or like what color your skin, you know what I mean? It has to do with competence. And there's no one in that has any, understanding of like military, security and defense, emergency management, disaster response, counterterrorism. I worked in a counterterrorism unit for a few years as an officer. And even there, I had like a great reputation. And I also implemented things and brought things together that greatly benefited the unit, and a great unit, great organization within Canada, and even people from within that organization trying to speak to these twiddledee and twiddledum numbnuts in cabinet that, again, they don't know what they're talking about, and they're not anyone that does any training or certifications for conduct after capture. They don't have it for hostile environment awareness training. They have none of that training. I know that for a fact. They don't have the standing rep deployment team courses. And if they do, they're not getting the information they're supposed to be getting. So these are all things, even journalists, media especially, they should be getting this training because they're reporting to Canadians the news, right? So you should have people that are actually qualified and trained in order to be able to collect data. So for example, when I was in the infantry as an officer, I wasn't getting my friggin' intelligence packages. I wasn't doing my combat estimates by going on the friggin' news and listening to media. So the fact that CSIS is doing that and even admitting it, and again, I have the receipt and I can share it again, the access to information request that was submitted. They actually put it in, like literally Justin Ling and Phil Gursky, because of these leftists, journalists, zero background in anything other than linguistics and journalism. And like at the low level journalism, right? Like again, you've never even heard of these people, right? Yeah, like no security clearances, like I was saying, like never, like, oh my God. So we got something here too. I'm really sorry to hear that. I know a bunch of people that got out of the Canadian Armed Forces because they had no choice. They were either kicked out, they were harassed, they were demonized. It was a lot. And yeah, even people pregnant and stuff like that. And just because they refuse a shot, like I can't, like I just, it infuriates me. Like people like lost their pensions, dishonorably discharged and stuff like that. And idiots on the, like, again, I'm not saying liberals, I'm saying leftists. Like even saying to people I know that are actual heroes, don't let the door kick you on the way out. So people actually having to leave their careers, being of service to Canada and choosing to make a stand when it mattered, getting vilified and lives ruined. Helen Bruce, over $100,000 now in court fees, legal fees, and she's getting vilified at Huntmar in Ottawa. She's Ottawa Police Services, over 20 years, and she might get dishonorably kicked out. She was suspended and charged the weekend of the Freedom Convoy. And again, she was in my network on Signal and Telegram too. And again, not looking at independent journalists for our data collection. We were looking at people with actual experience or doing the research ourselves, obviously, right? So like even with me doing combat estimates or assessing anything, right, for at an operational level or even platoon commander level, you're looking at data collection and also observing, right? So like even doing reconnaissance prior to a mission. And before you put your, your mission together, your plans together, and doing a recce and just like assessing areas, doing the surveillance piece, getting aerial photos, looking at the terrain, looking at ingress routes, access routes, RVs, ERVs. There's so many things to consider. And I don't know, I'm going on all these tangents, but like there's ways that you can collect data. And then there's ways where you don't, right? And so like for me, it would be getting information from people that are in the international security industry, people that I've deployed with that I can trust, or that I know that have deployment experience and or have whether it be in the military or global affairs or Five Eyes community or NATO or UN or whatever, and asking these people first, bouncing things off them. And again, I'm not going on Rebel News to get my data, right? Like I'm not going to dox people, like especially my key informants, for obvious reasons. But I'm passing on information and I'm giving proof, and I'm just making sure that I'm not giving names or addresses or anything like that in the process. And so I'm rambling on, and I just friggin' hate hearing about people honestly like having to leave being of service because of because of this. Like, especially, I just like, oh my God. And people think that this was like this in all the other countries. It was not. No, Canada was really friggin', anyways, it was a psyops in every country. And so I'm going to share this first. So this is Excess Baby Deaths Investigation by Tail Gunner Jim. This was posted a year ago, maybe even over a year ago. And Helen Gruss, I keep on going all over the place, but she's Ottawa Police Services working with the Sexual Assault Child Abuse Unit for over 7 years. And so she had like a lot of experience with sudden deaths in children and or suspected homicide or neglect. Anyway, all of that stuff. And hard friggin' job, and well respected amongst her peers, against people in the international security industry as well, because of the work that she does be outside of that. Okay, also, again, I'm going to reiterate, that's a hard friggin' job to have. And because she was sharing the excess deaths that she was investigating, and there was a possible link with that in the therapeutic, whether it be, because of the pregnancy and or because the mother or the father taking the shot. Anyway, all of that stuff. And called a right-wing extremist, called this conspiracy theorist, tinfoil hat stuff. Again, she was getting ostracized internally from within the department, and so were a few other people I knew, just from that district alone in Ottawa, or that precinct, whatever you want to call it. And there was multiple others as well, but like just that one alone was it was horrific how that was handled. and not looking at the medical, government, and scientific information that myself and her were getting, which was credible. It was official data, and it was we're getting so much like the initial reports about the vaccine effects, adverse events. There were doctors and nurses admitting that they were getting overwhelmed because of vaccine injuries. Okay, more so than when they said that the pandemic was even originally declared. Okay, like by far. And again, and so like I've shared this stuff on previous videos, but again, this is over a year old, so it's not like this is new information. And people like Helen Gruss, over $100,000 in court fees. They can't have an open hearing; it can't be televised, and so it's like you have to show up at Huntmar police station in Canada in order to support her. And she's had so much of her like evidence and data that she's needed to present, like even witnesses declined, and yet they're like the prosecution, these criminals, okay, try to shut down investigations that were needed to be done. It's part of your friggin' job. Actually was able to have witnesses, and one of the witnesses was someone that was I believe a sister-in-law. Yeah, so like no ethics violation there, right? Like oh my God. And like get me as a witness for Helen Gruss, and I would share the truth. I would show all the data that I have, that she gave, that Byron Bridle gave. Yeah. I'm going on these friggin' tangents, but it's because like children were dying, and Helen Gruss, like that, this has hit her really, really hard. Again, I can't talk for her. Maybe I'll get her on this like Rumble, or YouTube once her court stuff is over. I don't believe that she can talk to anyone right now or do interviews until it's over. And this is why she's been being punished by this being extended in the courts. And Chris Renwick, like he is completely biased, and he's the one that's overseeing these hearings. And again, like he is a leftist. He's pushing a woke narrative, and I believe that he's put there specifically as a bias judge or whatever you want to call it, in order to sway this hearing a certain way. And it frustrates me because Helen Gruss is an actual hero. She's excellent at her job. Even beyond that, I would hire her in a heartbeat to work with me on the contracts that I would like to do, again, for the higher levels of government within Canada. And if you don't want to fucking finally, you know what I mean, like admit you were wrong, you don't even have to do that. Like just let me back in the fucking community. Then I will go to the US, where I've already had multiple offers just in the last week alone to do these courses there in nicer weather. Yeah. So again, I'm a very patriotic person. And but again, like I've been at this for a number of years now, and trying to assist people within the courts in so many different ways, and not even anyone within Canada even promoting my work. So it is what it is. And here's Dr. John Campbell, and yeah, so many people I know really fucked over because of all this, and being heroes, being what you would expect them to be, and speaking up in a peaceful, diplomatic way, and still getting screwed over in the end anyway.
Let's hope this isn't duplicated in somewhere like the United
Rewind this.
It can be up to the first. Well, a warm welcome to this talk. It's Wednesday evening, the 19th of October. Now, we've been looking at excess deaths lately. These are deaths more than we would expect based on the 5-year average. And the Scottish government has just ordered an inquiry into a raised death rate in neonates. Now, obviously, neonates, newborns, the first days of life, it can be up to the first week. Typically, we would say neonates in the first week of life. Some people will extend that to 4 weeks, but it's basically newborn babies dying at a higher rate than expected in Scotland. Now, Scotland's only got a population of just under 5.5 million, but it does collect very good data, unlike the United States, for example, where the data can be somewhat disparate from different parts of the country. So it's good to get data from these small European countries where data is well collected. And this is very concerning. Let's dive straight into it. This is review of neonatal mortality in Scotland. Now, this comes from here, Healthcare Improvement Scotland. So an official affiliated government body is investigating this. Healthcare Improvement Scotland, asked by the Scottish government. So this is a formal request from the Scottish government. Review of significant increase in neonatal mortality 2021 and 2022. Now, the BBC has actually unpicked some of the information here, which is accurate. So let's look at what they've said. Scottish government orders review of neonatal deaths higher than expected. Neonatal deaths, 2 particular spikes over 6 months have been noted. September 2021 was the first one. At least 21 babies under 4 weeks died. Remember, this is from a population of just 5.5 million. Now, let's hope this isn't duplicated in somewhere like the United States or in England. But if it was, you can see the numbers would really be getting quite large. Something we certainly need to get worked out.
Allegedly, maybe.
March 2022 was the second one. At least 18 babies under 4 weeks died. So they are taking the neonatal period as up to 4 weeks there. Now, the average mortality rates amongst newborns is about 2 per 1,000. Now, tragically, this does happen. I mean, children can be born with various problems that can result in their death in the first few weeks of life. This is tragically the case. We know about this. We've minimized it, and there's further steps possibly could be taken to minimize it even more. But at the moment, it's about 2 per 1,000 births. So tragic for the 2, but low, basically, lowish for 2 per 1,000 births. Now, in September, in March 2020, that should be 2022, sorry. So September 2021, it was 4.9. March 2022, it was 4.6. So we can see the rates here are double what we would expect them to be. And for all of 2021, the year taken as a whole, again, much higher. It was 3.9 for the year as a whole, and 2020 was 3.1. So increasing here, apparently, year on year. Now, a preliminary investigation. So this has been investigated. We don't have the details of this, but there was a preliminary investigation found the September spike was not linked to COVID. Yeah. And this form of monitoring was introduced in 2017. So that's 5 years. This is definitely the highest for 5 years. And other sources are saying it's the highest for 10 years in terms of neonatal deaths. So what is going on here now? This is a report from the Scotsman newspaper, national newspaper in Scotland, Dr. Sarah Stock, University of Edinburgh. Direct quotes from Dr. Stock. I think the numbers are really troubling, and I don't think we know the reason yet. What we do know is it's not neonatal COVID. So we can be confident it's not neonatal COVID. The rates of COVID infection in babies are very low, and deaths from COVID, thankfully, are very, very small. So that is true and good to reinforce. So this isn't COVID affecting babies. So it's not COVID related. Now, other information coming from Public Health Scotland. COVID Scotland. This is another well-known Scottish newspaper, the Herald, reporting COVID Scotland vaccines ruled out in neonatal death spike, according to this report from the Herald. Public Health.
Okay, I'm going to show you, just for people that have seen this before, my apologies. It's just for anyone that's new to my channel. Okay, so this is information that I've been giving for literally years to media at all levels, to even internationally, all levels of government, cabinet members, people that were like heads of departments, like Brenda Lucki for MRCMP, Omar Algebra, who's a friggin' not an expert, Teresa Tam, Patty Hajdu, Vera Etches, Wayne Eyre, who's the chief of defense staff, and multiple others. Gave them all this information, and then even put together letters and memorandums for soldiers to submit to their chain of command, and not one of them was minuted. And as someone that was 15 years as an officer, I know that is you're unlawful. Officers are supposed to minute official military correspondence, and they did not. And some of them were literally directed towards Wayne Eyre, and he did not respond. So let's see here. So these are the VAERS that were reported. So I'll open this one up. You won't be able to see it until I bring it up. So this one is the one that is for February of 2021. So just bear with me. And yes, even the ombudsmans I shared this information with, no answer back. Things to consider. Okay, so you'll see it says cumulative analysis of post-authorization adverse events reports, Pfizer 073020048, received through 28 February 2021. 28 February 2021. There was a lock date. It might have been the 16th of February. We'll see here. Let me see. Anyway, I'm going to Control F. I'm going to write COVID to make it easier. Okay, so COVID for this is the coronavirus disease 2019. Okay, so for events reported, infections and infestations of COVID-19, 4.6% of the VAERS that were reported. So even as of February of 2021, 3 years ago now, people knew that you had the possibility of actually contracting this because of this. Okay, let's see what else. I've showed this before, so I'm really sorry for people that have seen this before. I have videos where I've gone through this much more extensively. So even with this as well, influenza-like illness in 2%. There's only 10 portions of that, but let's see about pneumonia, 23 cases. $51 for the AESIs. Significant injury. Number of cases, 3,067. 7.3% of the total PM database, of which 1,013 are medically confirmed and 2,054 are non-medically confirmed. So there we go, more pneumonia. So you can contract pneumonia through the vaccine and the flu through the vaccine. And let's see what else. Okay, how about this? This should make a lot of people upset. Look at that, ladies and gentlemen. 259 people, just again within, as of February 2021 for Pfizer alone, reported just in North America. Or sorry, not just North America, wrong. It's internationally, but again, what were reported. And there was the estimate was that 3 to 5% of the actual VAERS during that time for various different reasons, including financial incentive. People were not reporting the vaccine injuries. And this is on the record. Doctors and nurses were admitting this. People that suffered from vaccine injuries, trying to report it, not being reported, people ignoring it. So look at all these friggin' multiple different cases of various different types of herpes. So I've said this before. Before you friggin' freak out on your significant other, again, I've been celibate for years, and but like again, if you've been in a relationship and somehow your significant other, ends up with herpes, you know what I mean? Like before you friggin' lose it on them and assume they've been cheating on you, maybe they got it from one of these, and it could be even from like the one of the other ones. And how you respond to therapeutics as well. It's not only ingredient dependent, but it's also host dependent as well. And I don't even know if you could see this. Wait a minute. Shit. Oh. Okay, yeah, you're seeing it. Okay, good. Whew. Oh, that's in the 2022 one. Case of AIDS, spontaneous Pfizer. So there was even like. Yeah, so people told me that this was not a risk. Look what this reads. Spontaneous abortion. Spontaneous abortion with neonatal death. And in this, they were saying that it's not, its effectiveness is not known. Like, they already had people that were pregnant. This is the thing too. Like, they said you didn't. And the original trials were debunked. Like, I'm also going to reiterate that. There's a lot of side effects in here that you can go through. And okay, so now I will. Actually, no, I'm going to share the other one. Yalla. Stop sharing. I'm going to share the 22 results. And what I had shared with all levels of government and multiple stats. Let's see here. Just go to this window. Okay, so here's another one. So this is the lock date was 16 March 2022, and the report run date was 21 March 2022. And again, I have sent messages that I've shared with all levels of government, media outlets, public health ombudsman, like you name it, and like even then, and then like multiple different mayors. And so with this one, we could just go through. Excuse me, and you'll see, unfortunately, a lot of cancers that were reported, and this is almost 2 years ago now. Almost 2 years ago now, guys. And why people during the Freedom Convoy, there was more innocent people that were doctors, lawyers, firefighters, paramedics, nurses, soldiers, veterans, law enforcement, people like literally of all walks of life that were showing up and being peaceful. It's because they already had family members that were impacted, a lot of the people as well, by the mandates, the lockdowns, but also because of the the amount of coercion, within Canada there was. Like, look at this, like breast cancer, right? 45 cases during like that again that are locked in, reported as of this date, and 3 to 5% actually being reported during this time. And you will never going to get many of the the real numbers, but I've also shared that the approximate one right now that's being distributed with the most accurate statistics is in or around 17 million people that have died because of the vaccine. Possibly, I have to say that, possibly. Strong arguments, strong evidence. Colorectal cancers, endometrial, oral, tonsil, lung, skin, thyroid. Let's see, neoplasms. That's cancer as well. You know, thyroid, benign oral. There's benign and malignant, just like, anyway, adrenal neoplasm. See, they try to break down and say things differently and with different words to confuse you as well, so you don't put two and two together that, hey, this means the same friggin' thing, right? Like you might say like pulmonary and lung, and put them in different places. Oh, friggin' nipple. Are you friggin' kidding me? Like cardiovascular, central nervous system, cervix. Cool. Yeah. And 67 friggin' rows. Are you friggin' kidding me, man? Islet cell, neoplasm, Hodgkin's disease. So you got like the Hodgkin's lymphoma. Jeez. Oh my God. Like I see this a lot again, because I've been sharing this for over 2 years. It just still friggin' like I just don't know how, when people were given this information, that they didn't do anything about it. Oh, you can see this too. That's interesting. So this is Betty's Law. This is something I shared as well, and multiple times. Oh, I'm out of it. One minute. Where did it go? Okay, I can't even find it anymore. There we are. Okay, 2022 February. So 2 years ago, and this is from just before. This is Toronto. So Ontario, the province of Ontario. So the law, the same legal parameters apply for the province of Ontario. So that's why this is something that I took from people that put together something that was really well laid out, and discusses like a lot of different issues with, again, the mandates, the lockdowns, the declaring the Emergency Act on innocent civilians, so many different freaking things. Oh my God, making people into villains and criminals by virtue of declaring an emergency act because of listening to leftist journalists. Anyway, I'm going on these freaking tangents, but like, yeah, so this is like really exciting, so much legal documentation. The lack of allowing for religious exemptions and so many friggin' different things. And by the way, that's going to bite people in the ass too, because people are suing because of people dismissing the ability to have religious exemptions. Again, this is unheard of, like the level of control. And so people really did prove where, like, what side of Europe, like what side they'd be on in various locations of Europe. Just saying. Yeah, just sharing the hospitalizations that were happening after therapeutics were enforced in various different regions. I've shared so much on this, like you wouldn't even friggin' believe. Anyway, let's see. I'm going to pull up something else here for public. So this is a memorandum, 13 November 2021, for a, oh, no, you can't see that one. Okay, let me just get out of this. Maybe you couldn't have seen the other one as well. Yeah, if people want to like, share, and subscribe, that is a great way of assisting, supporting, and enabling my cause to get my content out there, and to escape the censorship that I've been getting for the last few years. And I think now that the Emergency Act was deemed unconstitutional by a freaking hero, Judge Mosley, I think that things are going to be changing more. I'm just going to try share a memorandum that I submitted to multiple different soldiers, and so memorandum general and the date, their commanding officer through chain of command, again, the official, and then just a request for exemption from current COVID-19 mandates. And then this is where they would put their service number, and then their last name. And if they were infantry, this is their MOS ID. And then the references, I was giving the debunked original trials. The increases in COVID-19 are unrelated to levels of vaccination across 68 countries and 2,947 counties. sharing the information coming out of the UK and other areas in uncensored countries that 71% of COVID-19 deaths are vaccinated as of 7 September. Government briefing. I talked about the spontaneous abortions. Gave links, safe links, even natural immunity, like the superiority of natural immunity, and how if you had already contracted COVID, it would actually be more of a detriment to you for your white blood cells, your heart, by taking the inoculation. Aspirating needles, we're still not aspirating friggin' needles. Okay, there's a difference between intramuscular, intravenous, intracellular, and especially with the big friggin' needles that we're using and the little arms that we're putting it in, there was like the likelihood of hitting a vessel very, very friggin' high. And I was even saying this again multiple years ago because of being a coach with the bodybuilding community and people do anyway, and various injections and things like that. And so there's a difference between subcutaneous anyway. And so we were not aspirating needles, long story short. And so I was approximating that anywhere between 4,000 and 6,000 people, there could have possibly been a leak of the therapeutic that they were given, where it crossed that the blood vein barrier, whatever you want to call it, vessel barrier, and where there was immediate side effects within minutes or hours, even my family members of people that I know personally. And so that's also why there were a lot of side effects during that time as well, was because of the fact that people were not aspirating needles. And what you do is you draw back once you poke, and if there's any blood that you see that goes within the fluid, then you immediately take it out and you throw it away, and then you try to locate another area where you're not hitting a vessel, and then aspirate again. And if you don't see any blood or anything like that, then that's when you plunge, right? Aspirate, plunge, aspirate, check, plunge. Sorry. I was sharing the information about the waning immunity from the therapeutics. I just wish that people weren't so friggin' egotistical, getting their friggin' content, their combat estimates. Wayne Eyre, who has like an entire intelligence friggin' organization at his fingertips. Like I just can't getting his friggin' intel from Justin Ling and Phil Gursky, leftist journalists, zero experience in that. Anyway, security and national freaking defense community, none of that stuff. I still can't believe it. Oh my God. You can't make this up. Oh yeah. And then Ontario, because again, I wanted to make this provincially as well. Policy on inflating numbers by 66 to over 80%, depending on the age group, right? So again, the hypocrisy and how they were spinning and inverting things that when it suited their wants and needs for statistics, but then doing the complete opposite, underreporting and messing up the statistics when it didn't suit them. And so what they were saying was like, okay, we're getting all these confirmed cases of COVID. And by the way, the PCR tests, look at my videos on that as well, because even that, there was no ability to distinguish between flu and friggin' pneumonia and friggin' COVID. Okay, still probably not. And then again, even multiple different things, sources also testing positive for a lot of these, even rapid tests and stuff like that as well. And then the way they were cycling, which would give confirmed positives pretty much all the friggin' time. Holy shit, things were crazy. So, but overinflated the numbers, saying that, oh, so these are the ones that are being reported. Again, a lot of false positives. And so because of this, we're going to say that there's 66% more than what's being reported, because again, we're not accounting for the rest of the population, right? Like this is just like a sample of and so ridiculous. And upwards of 80% in some demographics as well, because like they can spread it more and be asymptomatic and you wouldn't be able to tell. Made shit up. They've since retracted this, again, for convenience, as of March of last year, 2023. And now they're reporting things more accurately, a little more accurately. So we're still getting made fun of internationally about how ridiculous our science community is now too. So yay. And I know great scientists, but they are people that are not getting their degrees, their official degrees, because they're going against the norm, against the narrative, against these woke institutions. And oh my God, it's just frustrating. People are accepting that all the pseudoscience is being taught from various different ways. So about gain of function. Anyway, and about the effects on adipose tissue, ACE2 modulation by diet and obesity, potential implications in COVID-19 infections and severity. So there was a lot of linkages between people that were overweight or obese, and implications for having more serious symptoms or being more symptomatic, right? And so that's why I was saying, not trying to be rude, but the best thing you could do is work out and lose weight. All right, that's way better than many other things. Yeah, I was going into rights to privacy, setting different legislation. Right to provide consent for medical treatment, just like so many friggin'. It wasn't even approved at FDA level yet. Like I just consent, no treatment without consent. A health practitioner who proposes a treatment for a person shall not administer the treatment and shall take reasonable steps to ensure that it's not administered unless he or she is of the opinion that the person is capable with respect to the treatment and the person has given consent, or he or she is of the opinion that the person is incapable with respect to the treatment and the person's substitute decision maker has given consent on the person's behalf in accordance with his Act 1996 to Schedule A as Section 10, Subpara 1. The following are the elements required for consent to treatment. The consent must relate to the treatment. The consent must be informed. That one right there, that didn't happen. The consent must be given voluntarily. That did, for a lot of people I know, that didn't happen. And the big one here too. The consent must not be obtained through misrepresentation or fraud. There were so many more, but like talking about 98% effective, and I'll get into that, how it was like, there's a difference between relative and absolute. And I'm just going to get out of this. I'm going to go back. Oh yeah, speaking of, actually, no, I wasn't speaking about that at all. Anyway, just random out there. I would highly recommend people take a look at Mark Sargent's YouTube channel. I've looked at it a lot more in the last few days, especially again. And there's a lot of friggin' good content that I even I've missed, even though I've been obsessed with doing research on this stuff for many, many years. And fun fact, he actually did an interview with Russell Brand 6 years ago, over friggin' 6 years ago. So even then, like even Russell Brand has been open to this for at least 6 years. And Mark Sargent, he is literally like has been someone that has been so for many, many years on the record discussing and sharing that stuff as well. But again, like that's just random. Okay, so I wanted to share just the search engines that come up for excess deaths. And this is from a month ago from Dr. John Campbell.
Well, a warm welcome to this talk. It's Saturday, the 23rd of December. Now, I want to review excess deaths, which remain high in the vast majority of our countries throughout 2023. Now, the fact that this isn't being discussed on mainstream media or legacy media, the fact that this is not top of the agenda in Parliament really begs the question, why is this not being discussed on mainstream media? Why is this not top of the agenda in Parliament and Senate and Congress or whatever? It really is getting a bit, let's use the word strange, that this is not being discussed. Now, I've got some pretty hard data for you this morning that I've been working on for a little while now. This is mostly from, I'm going to concentrate on 2023, but we'll look at 2022 as well. Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD STAT. So pretty well recognized site. Now, I have been taking data from quite a few sites like CDC, Office for National Statistics, quite a few others, Our World in Data, but the OECD data is consistent. This is not some aberration. This is happening, and it's on a huge scale, totally huge scale. Let's dive in straight away with Australia. Now, for weeks 1 to 34 in 2023 in Australia, there was 14,710 excess deaths, 16.8% above what we would expect based on the 2015 to 2019 average. So 16.8% more deaths than we would expect in Australia in the first 34 weeks of 2023. Incredible, really. Now, the COVID deaths, according to the Australian authorities or according to OECD, just under 5,000. So we can see that only a minority of these deaths were COVID deaths. Now, these deaths that are attributed to COVID,
false positive COVID.
Of course, we're not going to go into the debate of with COVID or from COVID, but the vast majority of these people, pretty well all of these, had significant age factors or comorbidities. For the vast majority of people, me last month, for example, COVID is a relatively minor disease. It knocks you off for a week or two, but it's not a life-threatening disease for the vast majority of people. So I suspect that these are people in vulnerable risk groups primarily. Australia 2022, the whole year, weeks 1 to 52, the number was 29,738, 18.7% above what we would expect. Add the two together and you get 44,448 excess deaths in Australia. So, we're looking at about 18% excess deaths in Australia. Is this an isolated case? Of course not. Let's go on and look at Austria. Weeks 1 to 44, 2023, 4,444, 6.5% above what we would expect. Is this another unusual case? Not by any means. Let's go on and look at Canada. Canada 2023 data. So first 33 weeks, it's all that's available. 28,400 Canadians died, more than we would expect, 16.7% more than we would expect. COVID deaths in Canada are attributed to 4,613. And as we said, that's the upper estimate. But of course, if we compare that 4,613 with the 28,400, again, we see that the vast majority of deaths are not COVID related. We cannot blame this on COVID. There is other factors or factors probably, almost certainly contributing to this. But it's just everywhere, virtually everywhere. We'll see there are some exceptions. Canada 2023, it was 61,000 excess deaths, 22.3% above average. Add the two together, excess deaths in Canada, 89, nearly 90,000 excess deaths. Denmark, weeks 1 to 44, 3,052, 6.9% above average. And again, maybe just over 11% of those attributable to COVID. Denmark 2022, it was 11% excess deaths. And you add the two together, for a small country, you get 8,923 excess deaths during those 2 years. And of course, this is when Omicron was around, much less deadly disease. Finland, 10.5% more deaths than we would expect in the first 44 weeks of 2023. France, 22,268, 4.9% more than we would expect. For COVID deaths, again, less than a quarter. So 5,565 deaths attributed to COVID. 22,268 excess deaths. So we can see that the vast majority of these are not COVID deaths. France 2022, it was 11.9% above what we would expect, with 71,000 excess deaths. Germany, first 44 weeks of 2023, 59,000 excess deaths, 7.7% above average. 2022, it was 14.9% above average. Dealing with really high numbers of excess deaths, and as we'll see, these are wartime levels of excess deaths in many such situations. Right, we'll go on. Greece, 5.2% more than we would expect first 44 weeks of 2023. Iceland, weeks 1 to 44, 2023, 11.5% more deaths than we would expect. Tiny population, of course, in Iceland. They attribute no deaths to COVID. So all of these deaths would be non-COVID, according to the OECD report on Iceland. It just shows the way that different countries are monitoring and registering this differently. We can't really compare country with country, but I think we're starting to see a trend of massive excess deaths in 2022, continued as far as we have data throughout 20.
Thank you so much for saying that. I really appreciate that, Brad. Yeah, I would love it if people take a look at my old work too. I really, really appreciate that. I'm just going through questions to make sure I get through them because I was bad for that either yesterday or the day before. And so I'm making sure that I can actually see these questions. Okay. What do you think of the theory that the disease was released during the World Military Games in Wuhan in October 2019? There was a whistleblower from the team. I think it was gain of function. Could be also part of that. I definitely can see that. Definitely within a few months. That was around the time that it was leaked, and so there's a lot of connections with that. But the leak itself, even coming from the lab, that's also something that did happen. There could have possibly been multiple leaks in multiple different areas, including in North America. I've also seen a lot of interesting data on that, and so, but yeah, most definitely 2019 and October, and with Claydex and with Tabletop 201 talking about it as well. It was all around that time as well. Claydex obviously just a little bit before that, and then this was around the time that Pandemic 201 training was being conducted, and so. And there was a whistleblower coming out of Wuhan at China. I forget what his name is. I've shared his videos before, but he was 35 years old. He died. He was killed, possibly, allegedly, likely. And he was a big whistleblower coming out of China, even February of 2020. So before it was officially declared, and even myself, I was getting word of this being that it was released. I was getting word of that as early as December 2019. And I even was talking to people on Signal. I have witnesses and stuff like that were also like that can verify that this was being discussed shortly after October of 2019 for sure, and absolutely part of the PSYOPs planning. And so that's just my 2 cents on that. I probably didn't answer it as well as I could have, but yeah.
23.
Craziness.
Why is the silence deafening? Why? Israel.
Oh, and speaking of military training operations, I've also mentioned that the military training operation that happened a few months before Nord Stream 2 blew up, like that was also like NATO led, and so suspicions that there were allegations of people that during that training exercise a few months prior had planted the bombs for a detonation at a later date. And that's why even with training operations going on right now, especially in and around friggin' key resources, like oil fields, like off the coast of Palestine, but also with Yemen, with the connection of the internet between the East and West, doing training in that area too. This is a recipe for disaster. And there's been training operations that have been done where there have been events that have happened where, just look at my videos on Rumble, reference Holodomor, reference World War I, World War II, January 6th, Freedom Convoy. Big ones would be Northwoods. Look at that Northwoods incident. USS Liberty is a big one as well. There's so many I could talk about. USS Liberty is actually training. It was a training mission where the U.S. was attacked by Israeli soldiers, and where a lot of American soldiers were murdered, and 90% of life rafts being shot at, even though they had their huge ass American flag up, and it was confirmed that they knew them and they identified them as American. And the claim by witnesses, again, people that were on the friggin' ship that survived, going to a different port, in a safe way away, in a safe distance away. I mean, they wanted to sink the ship and kill everyone on board, essentially, and blame it on Egypt for yet another war, another proxy war being pushed by lobbyists who are trying to exploit people. So off the coast of Palestine right now, on the Gaza side, on the west side, there is billions of dollars worth of petroleum in that area, and there are lobbyists. Okay, these are not innocent civilians in either country or location. These are lobbyists that are trying to exploit these areas in order to get that wealth, those resources, and so much more. That's a completely different tangent, but just regarding training being done and how training at all different levels, and Johns Hopkins University very much being connected as well, possibly with all of this, and the ones that initiate and host and plan and organize these like the CLADEX, the pandemic, like Tabletop 201 training exercise, training operation, and all the other ones.
Israel, weeks 1 to 44, 2023, 11.8% more deaths than we would expect. COVID deaths, 640. So again, that's the COVID deaths. That's the excess deaths. The vast majority not COVID deaths. Israel 2022, 15.4% above the average that would be expected based on the 5-year average. And because of population growth in many areas, these are minimum figures. So the excess deaths are actually potentially higher because we're comparing to 5 years with a slightly lower population. Italy, now Italy, interesting. Italy, a bit of an exception. So first 44 weeks, basically what we would expect, basically no real percentage change, 0.28. Interesting. Are they collecting data differently in Italy? Is the OECD, the source of the OECD data differently? But there are a few other outliers as well. That outlier is harder to explain. So perhaps some anomalies in data collection there, but I wanted to include it in because we don't want to give a distorted picture, as many unfortunately do.
That's interesting.
Netherlands. First 44 weeks, 11.3% more deaths than we would be expected. In 2022, it had been 13.2. Again, that's for the whole.
I know people want to move on from this, but we cannot move on from this because there are still other friggin' pandemics like SPARS, possibly 2025, 2027, being that people want to push. Right? There's talking about these friggin' these new. Anyways, I'll keep this going because I can go on a rant, but these new friggin'
all of
viruses.
2022, 13.2% more deaths than we'd expect. New Zealand, first 44 weeks of 2023. 14.5% more deaths than we would expect. 3,960 actual people dying, more than we would expect. In 2022, it had been 17.6% more than we would expect.
Less people are getting vaccinated.
Don't worry.
23.
It's worse when we get to the UK and the US. Norway, 5.7% more than we would expect. 2023. 12.5 more than we would expect in 2022. Portugal, 6.3% more than we would expect. Spain, 3.7% more than we would expect. Switzerland, 3.9% more than we would expect in 2023. Now, coming on to the UK. Weeks 1 to 44, 2023, where we have data, 49,389. Number just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? 9.44% more than we would expect. These are excess deaths. COVID deaths, according to the UK, again, I don't believe for a moment it's that many directly attributable to COVID, but we can see that there's many more deaths not attributable to COVID. UK in 2022, we lost 52,514, more than we would expect, 9.26%. Add the two together, 2022 was 20.
And I will remind people, I showed this in previous videos, but 2021, 2022, huge amounts of excess deaths. And deaths in various different populations. And by the way, even up to and including MAID, medically assisted death, essentially euthanasia of people MAID, and it's gone up. That's gone up over the as the years have gone. The vaccine excess deaths went down in 2023 because there's less people getting vaccinated overall, and you'll notice that the flu magically disappeared for a large part of this as well. And again, this is why like there was always a certain amount of people that died annually of flu. Multiple countries were reporting zero flu deaths, and the amount of COVID deaths were very much similar to flu deaths in previous years.
23, we get 101,903 excess deaths in the United Kingdom during those periods of time. Now, I kind of hesitated to put this in, but I've done it, so I'm going to give it to you. Height of the Blitz, the bombing in the Second World War, 1940 to May 1941. Civilian deaths were 40,000. Terrible. But we lost 100,000 in these 2 years. We've lost first 44 weeks of the year just shy of 50,000 just for the first 44 weeks of 2023. And of course, the Blitz just completely influenced British culture. You know, this is what I was brought up with, this legacy. There'll be bluebirds over the white cliffs of Dover. This is just massive in British culture. Maybe not so much now, but certainly my generation. And yet way more excess deaths. In 1940, we saw the country turned upside down. Children evacuated to various parts of the country. Massive defences put in place. The country on a complete war footing. Now, what do our current generation of politicians do? Walk out the chamber when someone tries to talk about it. What the heck is going on here?
Yeah. Zero respect.
Total civilian deaths in World War II, 70,000. So the last couple of years, excess deaths for reasons that
UK, he's talking about.
Aren't being explained, aren't even being addressed, for questions that aren't even being asked. More deaths than civilian UK deaths in World War II. We lost a lot more combatants than that, but they were civilian deaths. United States. Week 1 to 37, 2023, the OECD data. 155,000 more Americans died than we expect. Attributable to COVID, 76,000. Again, quite how accurate that is, we don't have full data, but
not very
a lot
accurate.
of people died. That's not attributable to COVID. 7.8% more
Pneumonia.
than we would expect dying. In 2022 in the United States, it was getting on for 500,000, 495,749, 17.53% above.
My head around it. I've seen this so many times.
Add together the 2 years, so the 155,000 that died in 2023, that's only the first 37 weeks, of course, where we have data. They're getting on 500,000 that died in 2022. We get 651,512. Now, again, this is sort of my era time being brought up.
And even the people that they're implying are COVID deaths. Were they actually COVID deaths that were naturally acquired, or even with the therapeutic? I've shared the actual reports coming right from Pfizer, so not even Moderna, AstraZeneca, Novavax, Sinovac, none of those, literally just Pfizer. And a large percentage of people with VAERS contracted COVID through the vaccine. Let that sink in. So they're talking about COVID deaths. So, okay. So was it because of the vaccine? That's another excess death that's attributed to the vaccine. These MAID cases that are going up, 2022, 2023, going up. This is also, in my humble opinion, attributed to the lockdowns, the mandates, the leadership, and the mismanagement of our economy during these pandemics. During the pandemic lockdowns, multiple ones here, destroyed people's lives.
During the Vietnam War.
Just crazy.
Total US National Archive, the US National Archive showed that 58,220 US soldiers died during that appalling conflict. So we have a situation here where we've lost 650,000 Americans, more than 10 times more than died in the Vietnam era. In the Vietnam era, rightly, there was massive demonstrations over the whole country. The whole anti-war movement that eventually America did leave Vietnam. But a total of 58,222, terrible, of course, casualties, but way dwarfed by the excess deaths in 2022 and 2023. As I say, more than 10 times more excess deaths. And yet, what do we hear about this from mainstream politicians and mainstream media? I think you're starting to understand my confusion. Now, other anomalies. Hungary was 2023. Deaths were 3.2% less than would be expected. Poland, it was basically what we would expect, basically 0%, 0.13. Slovak Republic, 1.54% less deaths than we would expect. Sweden, basically what we would expect. More.
So if you want to watch the full video, Dr. John Campbell, over 3 million subscribers. I'm really, I'm happy that he's getting more viewers, not less, by sharing the truth. And he does cite his references as well. The stats, OECD, org index. So like if I pull it up, you can do this yourself as well. Don't just take my word for anything. But the OECD stats, I'm verifying it. I don't know if you can see it. I'll just pull it up. Get back in StreamYard. Because again, if you're on my channel, like you want to be thorough. OECD stat. So excess deaths by week. So yeah, these are official stats from an official site. And he shares more references, but I want to share more videos on excess deaths and possible links. So let's see. Dr. Drew's been talking about it a lot as well. And this was just a few days ago, 2 days ago.
Time now to get right into it. We'll let you watch the first part of our conversation, you wonderful people of YouTube, but this is a medical physician who's got strong views on a variety of subjects, including Anthony Fauci, so we won't be able to do the whole thing. You'll probably know Dr. Drew because he's been in media for years. He's a board-certified physician and legacy celebrity talent with over 35 years of national radio, New York Times best-selling books, and countless telly shows bearing his name. You can check out his work at drdrew.com. Plus, he's on Rumble streaming with his show, Ask Dr. Drew. Now, let's get into our conversation. Dr. Drew, thanks for joining us.
It's great to see you, sir. And as we were just starting to mention before the mics heated up, we were together a few years ago. We did a speech together about recovery. And as I think about our last meeting and then this one, many roads have been traveled. Would you have imagined the world would evolve the way it has?
No, and the only people that did imagine it were kind of peripheral, zealous, fringe evangelists that were at the time regarded as conspiracy theorists. I always felt that in our conversations before, because we're talking about medicine, we were talking about mental health, we were talking about addiction and wellness. Yep. I know that in our previous conversations, we would have touched on the social implications of a condition like addiction, that addiction is somewhat related to social pressures. We may even have got as far as saying that the pharmaceutical industry possibly exploits addiction. We may not have been in a position to talk about Purdue and Big Pharma and the Sackler family and the way that the opioid crisis has been handled. But, you know, I know that's the kind of thing we would have touched on before. But as you say, we're in a very different territory now. From your perspective, Doc, what lines have been crossed and how is it we've found ourselves here?
Well, there's, I mean, so I've become a student of history because of this, and much to my shock. But
you and a lot of people.
I want to answer that two ways that are a little bit glib and a little bit just so. One is post-structuralism has taken hold in this country, in particular, in a way that has been destructive. The idea of truth has been undermined, and the reality is there is a truth. And one of our goals should be to ascend to some approximation of truth. We've forsaken that, and that has bled into sciences and everything. So that's a problem. Number two, that's the sort of historical sort of note. But number two, you mentioned the Sackler family and the excesses of the opioid industry. But the real perpetrators of the opioid crisis were evangelical physicians. In this country and in the UK as well, pain medicine became this cudgel that went around and forced physicians, sound familiar now, forced physicians to make pain the fifth vital sign. Pain was more important. There should be no pain ever. But to the point where 90% of the Vicodin prescribed in the world was prescribed in this country. That was not the drug company. That was me and my peers, not me. That was my peers. And evangelical physicians are dangerous. Fast forward to COVID. In this country, we have a Deborah Birx who evangelizes for lockdowns. An evangelical physician went state to state, governor to governor, and persuaded, frightened these governors that they didn't lock down, they'd be killing people. Same phenomenon, same playbook, same disaster.
It's interesting that we're talking about two really subjects that both of which I'm fascinated by: the impact of post-structuralism and relativism, the idea that there perhaps is that there's a degree of ambiguity. And look, I'm sympathetic to the idea that there are institutions that have been deemed just and granted authority that could benefit from open-ended analysis. These are some of the areas of post-structuralism, not necessarily talking about semiotics and the semantic component of that, but certainly looking at power from an open-minded perspective. But also the idea that when you say evangelical physicians, it shows that there's a sort of component to prescribing medicine and issuing medical care that is emotional rather than practical. And the whole
these days for sure for sure, not only emotional but also social, because now we are having these movements in medicine where people are, I was a scientist, I was a clinician, and the idea that we have social movements within medicine and focusing on things that are away. I mean, it's good that we're paying attention to these things, but that those are sweeping us away from science is really very, very concerning.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, and I don't know how or why that's happened, because the post-structuralist idea, does that lead to the over-emotionalization of everything? Or I would have thought that it was quite an academic, quite cold, atheistic, materialistic, rationalistic ideology. And yet what we are talking about now is a type of hysteria within the medical profession.
But the hysteria was, the world, much to my amazement, seemed to have been prone to this hysteria. You're absolutely right. So now, again, I was giving you just so things that came to mind when you asked your initial question. My other sort of frame is, and I know you'll agree with this, is we've had, particularly again in this country, a narcissistic turn. The general trait structure of our personalities have gone towards what's called cluster B, borderline sociopath, narcissist. And I'd not seen a lot of histrionic, but it was waiting in the background, clearly, with the hysterias right on the heels of it. And I can go on and on. I wrote a book about that 20 years ago, and it's something I can talk a great deal about. I saw it coming. I predicted. I knew that the liability of narcissism is scapegoating. I knew there would be scapegoating, and I knew there would be moms. And man, I didn't know it would look like this, though.
Do you think that this narcissism and this emergence of kind of pathological conditions that
social justice warrior, victimhood,
regarded as
victim mentality,
extraordinary and maybe even rare, and certainly as problems? It sounds like you're saying they've become normalized. Is this because of individualism? What do you mean by that? That everyone's become borderline sociopaths?
So I'll tell you where I noticed it. I worked in I'm an internist, but I worked in a psychiatric hospital for 35 years. I ran their addiction services for 20 while I was practicing general medicine in a hospital in an outpatient setting. I've been 40 years in medicine. And in the early mid 80s, when I first started working at the psychiatric hospital, I would look at all the admitting forms, patients coming in, and I would see there was always a window where we put in the personality diagnoses. And the psychiatrist would put in I saw all kinds of things, dependent personalities and obsessive compulsive, all the full spectrum of the A, B, and C disorders that you find in the DSM-5. I noticed toward the end of the 80s, all of a sudden I was seeing in the female predominantly borderline. And by the 1990s, only cluster B. That's all we admitted were cluster B patients. And I thought at the time, if you remember, I did a radio show back then, and I was talking to people, by the hundreds every night, And all I was hearing about was childhood trauma, childhood trauma, childhood trauma. And the outcome of childhood trauma is commonly a cluster B personality, at least trait, if not disorder.
Just to reiterate, because so that I understand properly, cluster B. Could you just tell me what the indicators are again?
That's the borderline narcissist, sociopath, and histrionic. Those are the cluster B disorders. They're considered the narcissistic disorders. And so having seen that evolution, I wrote a book in the probably 2000.
Interesting that he
8 or 10 or something
says that,
where we actually did personality inventories on celebrities, because I started seeing that they were really struggling with this stuff. A lot of trauma. You're shaking your head. And of course, we documented that they had a higher incidence of narcissistic traits than other populations. And even our control population, we used our control population was business school students, and they were above previously documented average. It was very clear. Everything was moving that direction. And it was all childhood trauma. That's the underpinning issue. And as you know, as we used to discuss, one of the rocket fuels for addiction is trauma.
So do you think that there's been a greater increase in trauma or a tendency to diagnose trauma? What are the prevailing ambient factors that have caused this phenomenon?
So it took until the 2000s for my profession to go, oh, adverse childhood experiences affect people's mental health and health. Amazing. Isn't that amazing? So they developed the ACE scale. What is on the ACE scale, which are adverse childhood experience scale? Things like divorce.
Okay, get to it. Get to the COVID stuff.
One thing that I was going to comment on your last construct of how you were describing the lack of connection. Lack of connection is really what you're talking about. Lack of connection to.
Okay, so I am bored with that. I'm going to put on the other one, which is with Jimmy Dore, talking about excess deaths. And I didn't watch all of it in its entirety, but what I did watch is already stuff that I've shared before.
And so that's what crystal balls say.
But
In the countries that are vaccinated
with hope.
and not in the countries that aren't.
Because they're outdoorsy lifestyles or whatever in Africa.
And so
crystal ball.
That's what crystal balls say, that the reason why. So, but no one will say it's from the vaccine. Not that we are, but the only people who will talk about this seem to be me and Dr. John Campbell. You know who Dr. John Campbell is, right?
Okay, so before Jimmy Dore and before Dr. John Campbell, he's double vaccinated. So is he. And again, these are both two people that I would love to do a podcast with, do an interview with. So I'm just saying that I am not. So therefore, even before they were calling this stuff out and reporting this stuff, I was sharing the science. I was sharing the medical and government data. I was sharing it publicly and at great risk to myself and expense to myself. And I've lost a lot of contracts and friends and families and peers, you know what I mean? And like I said, contracts too, for work, millions of dollars worth, and not able to travel. And it's just, it's been a bit of a nightmare. But again, it's important that people like myself and Helen Gruce and multiple others that I know and can't name, that we get this information out. But they're now saying that mainstream media finally covers excess deaths. It's funny because it's just now in the last 24 hours. And when they've started finally covering the vaccine issues, I was saying the same thing that they're saying now, right? So like there are a couple of, anyway, so Jimmy Dore, call me, get me on your show. Let's talk. I can help you out a lot. Clearly, look at my work.
Mm-hmm.
So he talks about it, and then I report what he talks about. And then guys like Dr. McCullough and Dr. Robert Malone, they'll also talk about it. But that's it. I haven't even heard excess talk yet on Joe Rogan. Maybe he has, but I missed it. But
Word
I'm
is
just
spreading, though, and I know it is because Dunnigan texted me to ask if I heard about this.
So I keep so again, at all the Christmas parties I went to, I kept saying, look into excess deaths and look into the Cleveland Clinic study about boosters. Just do those two things. Whatever you do, look into those. So here it's now made it to Fox News, Watch this.
Finally.
Dr. Mark, it's great to have you on. The Hill writes the following: "This is bigger than COVID. Why are so many Americans dying early?" It goes on to say life insurers have been consistently sounding the alarm over these unexpected or excess deaths, which claimed 158,000 more Americans in the first 9 months of 2023 than in the same period 2019. That exceeds America's combined losses from every war since Vietnam. Mortality up 26%, Dr. Mark, among 35 to 44-year-olds, up 19% among 25 to 34-year-olds. What in the world is going on?
And I want to add to that before I answer it. By the way, great report by Kevin Cork. Both of us read our heads off tonight. We're doing much worse than Europe. We lost during the heart of the pandemic about 1 million more excess deaths per year than Europe did. And now after the pandemic, same thing. Why are they doing better than us? We have a very high standard of living here. It's also cutting trace across all socioeconomic groups. It's not just poor people. It's not just socioeconomically disadvantaged. It's everyone. Now, I had a good conversation with you before I came on. I mentioned obesity. You made a great point. You said, look, that rate hasn't gone up. So I would say part of it, at least, is the long-term effects of obesity. It leads to high blood pressure. And during the shutdowns and the lockdowns, people didn't get medical care and they got anxious and they got depressed. There was more suicide. All of that is continuing. All of the anxiety is continuing. Stress-related diseases are up. Drug abuse is still up. Alcohol is up. COVID itself may have long-term effects. That could be it in terms of on the heart, lungs, kidney. But the vaccine, which definitely saved lives, nobody's studying what the long-term effects of the vaccine are here. That's also an elephant in the room. All of that has to be looked at. You can't just say, well, it's smoking, well, it's this, it's that. We need a careful examination of why this is happening. Terrible trend.
So as soon as they look into that, they're not going to like what they find out.
Nope. They're gonna.
So, like I've said, excess deaths is now creeping into mainstream news media. The Hill covered it. Now Fox News has covered it. It'll probably take another 6 to 8 months before it gets mentioned on CNN or MSNBC, maybe even a year. But it is going to be mentioned, and there's going to be documentaries put out by that it's going to quote respected doctors. By the way, all the doctors that have been telling you the truth about COVID and the vaccine, were super respected before COVID. And then the mainstream news media at the behest of Big Pharma tried to discredit those people, like Dr.
Keep cutting this off, but so any doctors and nurses that were kicked out or licenses revoked because of being actual good doctors and doing things like treating people with ivermectin or hydrochloroquine before the therapy, so many different things. They should be getting there, and then refusing to give the jab after realizing all the side effects that were happening. They should be getting their licenses back, and any money that they had to throw at legal fees, I'm hoping they get it back.
Robert Malone, who holds I think 5 patents on vaccines himself. Dr. Robert Malone, who was the first one to invent the mRNA vaccine technology platform. And when he's at the Salk Institute, these are not fringe doctors. These are mainstream fastball down the middle doctors with a litany of accomplishments. Also, Dr. McCullough, one of the most, if not the most cited doctors in writing.
Not by The View.
But in the country. And then as soon as they said something that went against the official COVID narrative, they had articles written about them that smeared them, just like they write articles about me over Forced to Vote, calling me the head of the dirtbag left, and I'm a right winger and all this stuff. They did the same thing. That's just like they did to Julian Assange. They said he was a rapist. Same thing they're doing to Russell Brand right now, because he's going against. Look what they did to Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson got fired for telling the truth, not for lying. He told the truth about Syria. He told the truth about Ukraine. He told the truth about COVID and lockdowns and the vax. And then he brought on Robert Kennedy to tell the truth about the rest of it, and they fired his ass. They didn't fire him for lying. And so once they look into it, this is what they're going to find out, because it's already being printed in peer-reviewed journals. What do you want to say?
If you want to look at it,
in peer-reviewed journals already,
so bodybuilders, they die young anyway. Generally,
you're just not seeing
so much shit into themselves.
Yeah,
the most ever, even by the high excess deaths in the bodybuilding world, it was crazy,
off this chart.
Okay, and I'm watching this, and it's so they have enlarged hearts anyway. They already have it from all the other shit they're taking, the HGH and all that. One guy, I shit you not, and the video isn't even saying it's the vaccine. The guy goes, I believe in the vaccine so much, I'm going to take it. And if I die, then you'll know. And he died.
So all I have to say, though, Kurt, because this will go up on YouTube, and I have to go by the
Rumble.
But eventually I want to put this clip up. That the vaccine is safe and effective. The FDA, the CDC has said it's safe and effective, and it doesn't. There are side effects, but they are rare. And so you have to go with the WHO, the CDC, and the FDA, what they say. It doesn't stop transmission or contraction, but it certainly slows it. It'll keep you from getting seriously ill, hospitalized, or death. It's a fantastic vaccine. So that's what the official...
Even with these organizations that he just mentioned, possibly approving chemicals and toxins in our food, in multiple other products that are sold to us, deeming them acceptable for human consumption, when in fact they are banned in other countries, like every other country, like even the dyes that are used and stuff like that as well, not safe for human consumption. So do you trust these people? No. And something else just came up on my media about the UN, a certain section of the UN that was assisting or enabling in events that happened in Israel and Palestine. And so anyone that was part of violence that happened, they have been like, there's no more money going to these organizations. And so these were people that were even part of the United Nations. I've been saying this for years on my whiteboards and publicly, that there are certain groups and people that are being presented as philanthropists, like Bill Gates with that foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, with WE for Canada, the UN, United Nations, World Health Organization, FDA. These are groups that are, there's lobbyists and marketing teams and advertisers and public affairs representatives that are talking to us and selling us a product and lying to us, and they don't care that they're lying to us. And anyway, I'm just gotta be careful about this stuff and just speak out on it peacefully, try to win this stuff in the courts, and keep talking about it, because this is still not mainstream yet.
Line is, and I can't go again.
Justin Trudeau, I shared this a while ago, and you can search this, but adults get vaccinated or whatever. That was this t-shirt that was just a few months ago when he allegedly got his COVID shot and flu shot. One in each arm. like that actually happened. There's fake needles.
Against it, but
I wish you told me that before it got hung out to dry as someone who's against vaccine.
Here's what Dr. John Campbell has found out, and he's upset that nobody else is reporting it, but I'm going to send him an email, let him know Fox News is reporting it, even though Dr. John Campbell pretends I don't exist and he won't talk to me.
They're kind of Fox
He'll
News.
talk to fucking anybody. He'll go on CNN.
No way.
The biggest bullshitters in the world. He'll go on their show. Oh, but he won't come on. He won't even return my email. But here we go. Let's watch.
Shouldn't have left the money.
I did. That's the problem. I left him $20 one time.
I'm actually surprised. I assumed that they had talked before. I'm actually surprised that hasn't happened yet.
Parliament really begs the question, why is this not being discussed on mainstream media? Why is this not top of the agenda in Parliament and Senate and Congress or whatever? It really is getting a bit, let's use the word strange, that this is not being discussed. Now, I've got some pretty hard data for you this morning. I've been working on for a little while now. This is mostly from, I'm going to concentrate on 2023, but we'll look at 2022 as well. Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD stat. So a pretty well recognized site. Now, I have been taking data from quite a few sites like CDC, Office for National Statistics, quite a few others, Our World in Data, but the OECD data is consistent. This is not some aberration. This is happening, and it's on a huge scale, totally huge scale. Let's dive in straight away with Australia. Now, for weeks 1 to 34 in 2023 in Australia, there was 14,710 excess deaths, 16.8% above what we would expect.
So what is an excess death? So they know how many people are...
And Canada's number
according to OECD, just under 5,000. So 2022, but of course, if we compare that 4,000...
2023, up 16.7%. And made in Canada has also increased 2023. I would add those numbers in the excess deaths as well. The increase I'm talking about in made numbers between 2022, 2023.
613 with the 28,400. Again, we see that the vast majority of deaths are not COVID related. We cannot blame this on COVID. There is 0.9% above average.
So let's see what Jimmy has to say about this after. Let's see.
Why? Expect 3,960 actual people dying, more than we would 1940 to May 1940.
Say,
Well, plus when you figure in like America, just let's take America for example, excess deaths. There's a lot of excess deaths from all kinds of things that shouldn't happen,
No, but
so
they
figured those in.
they
And on
figured
top-
those in.
yeah,
on top of that,
the Florida man style
yeah,
stupid shit that kills people.
that's
off,
right.
It's like way higher. And a bunch of these people, now I just blanked the fuck out watching these stats, but a lot of people, like Louis had a joke about all his friends are like, you know how many people died of COVID? It was like 3 9/11s. Like they were measuring
Yeah,
it in 9/11s.
yeah.
So those people, why aren't they paying attention?
Why aren't
to
they
this?
upset
Yeah.
about this? Because they're not told to be upset about this.
Check my videos on 9/11.
Yeah.
By Rachel Maddow, Sean Hannity,
If you
and
want.
Anderson Cooper. They're not told to care about this number. They're not even told about the number, Kurt.
Well, they
Well, they shouldn't be.
they can't talk about this because it indicts them.
That's right.
If your
Yeah,
people
obviously.
are dying at this rate, and a certain amount may be from the very safe and effective vaccine, maybe some very unlikely, unanticipated things, but there is also, hey, you shut down the world for a couple of years. You've got deaths of despair. You've got even things that are not as obvious, the stress that put on people. You've got
They were
it
already very
split
anxious
up
people too. a lot of them.
relationships, it split up families. You've got that element of it as well. So if you dig into
Homelessness,
this, even if it's not the
addiction,
safe and effective vaccine, it's still an
suicide,
indictment of public policy. It's
depression,
still an indictment
obesity.
of our elites.
We
because
can't afford that now.
There is no way that's not related to the way this was handled.
Hey, I have a lot of
one
school
way or
debt.
another.
The
Yeah.
institutions have to be sound because I still owe $100,000 for my, and yet I think Trump University's ripoff.
I'm excited. I can't wait to get to the U.S. Come on, get to it.
Aren't being explained, aren't even being addressed, for questions that aren't even being asked. More deaths than civilian UK deaths in World War II. We lost a lot more combatants than that, but they were civilian deaths. United States,
Here it is. Oh,
week 1 to 37, 2023, the OEC data.
155,000 excess deaths.
155,000 more Americans died than we expect.
Okay, so he's just saying the same things that I'm saying, except I didn't scream America. So excess deaths, it's being reported now, finally by people that are semi-mainstream, and so hopefully, God willing, this is going to be something that's going to be reported mainstream, like Jimmy Dore was saying, within the year. I'm hoping that's the case because, like, if we can circumvent another friggin' pandemic, or whatever else they have, and they're talking about these mutated viruses, and where there's like monkeys and rats, or whatever you want to call it, where there's like 100% fatality, and brain diseases, ocular diseases, all this other stuff. I've been doing a lot of research on that. It's very scientific in nature, and it does look like there are therapeutics that injected into these, again, obviously, there are therapeutics that are injected into these animals that are causing this. And again, it's destroying the ocular nerves. They like and causing brain issues. And so if that's leaked out into the environment, then that also has a like potential to target, again, that as well. I'm going on all these tangents, but there's a lot of scientific stuff on it. But this has been like the last few years. They have been trialing and doing tests on this therapeutic, and it's just weird that they're calling this virus what they were calling this therapeutic. I mean, it's not weird. That's what they do. That's what they call it. But I'm just I'm just on the lookout with this stuff. I'm going to leave it there. Take a look at my other videos, and if you don't already know, Dave Weiss and I are going to be talking on Tuesday, January 30th at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm really excited about that. I have not talked to him in person. We basically just coordinated the date time group, and we're basically going to be meeting over Zoom at that time because he's a very busy schedule, and I like this back and forth platform, and so it'll be interesting to see like where it goes, right? Because again, we haven't talked before, and usually when you get truthers talking for the first time, like these like tangents could go literally anywhere. So I'm going to try to focus it on the Earth shape, True Earth, because he's really, really well versed in that. And then if he wants to go on other avenues, then obviously I'll go down those other avenues with him. and yeah, so on that note, I will leave it at that unless major things come up right now. But I'm just glad that these excess deaths in all populations and all groups are finally being reported, especially the 2021-2022 period. And that's stuff that I've been sharing for years, right from the beginning. And then sharing even from the beginning with the access to information requests, how and why the Emergency Act was initiated and implemented, and the members who were seen as the counter-terrorist experts. And they were making all these claims about these individuals and these groups, and they were giving zero names, zero organization names, and zero names of people. Seriously. So anyway, I will leave it at that, and I hope that everyone has a wonderful day.